G'day guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be doing a review of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the latest installment from Marvel Studios on Disney+. This will be a full spoiler conversation. We're going to be going in depth with all the stuff that happened in this show. So if you haven't seen it yet, this is not the video for you. Obviously finish off the finale, then come back and watch it. But for those who have already seen it, jump on board. This is going to be a really fun conversation. I did this last time with WandaVision, and I'm doing it again with Sam. Thank you very much for coming on and having that opportunity to discuss Falcon and the Winter Soldier with you. It's always good fun, so thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Good to be back. Ready for another round.
Yes. I'll say Falcon and the Winter Soldier was originally planned to be the first Disney Plus installment by Marvel, but then COVID happened and shooting schedules and release schedules kind of got shuffled around. And as a result, WandaVision came first, but then we finally got The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, a show that many people were anticipating. I'll start off with my initial thoughts from the show. I really enjoyed it. It was a great watch because it showed the progression of these characters that we've come to love over the movies and seen them in a new way in 6 hours worth of television. And I was really pleasantly surprised to see Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes go through a full character evolution over that television limited series type length. And I really enjoyed that. I still have a few criticisms of the show, but overall, I had a damn fun time watching it. What were your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I really loved it. I think you can see why this was going to be the first one, as a much clearer continuation from Endgame, but also very much more of a middle ground of TV and movie. Being a shorter run, you could very much see how this could have been a movie, but I think it definitely benefited from the slightly extra runtime that they gave it, being a limited series instead. And I very much enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it.
Well, that's one of those things is that when you have the extra leeway with the amount of time you're allowed to spend with these characters, it really gives you those slower moments to really engross yourself with the mentality and the thought process of these characters. And it just allows so much more time to flesh them out as well. And I think that's what Marvel has done so well in the movies when they have been confined to that 2.5 hour runtime. Now the fact that they've got TV to work in now, it just is going to give us fans who are already in love with these characters even more material to just love them even more. And I'm really glad that they're doing that. So
yeah, I think the extra time really worked well. It was a lot less action heavy than I was anticipating. Just how much time they spent in those sort of quiet conversational scenes rather than the big action set pieces, which you tend to think would have been the stuff that would have got cut if this was restricted to a 2.5 hour movie runtime, which is a shame normally because those are some of the best scenes in any of those sort of projects, which means that now we're in this longer format, we get that, which really benefits in the long run, particularly with how much Marvel puts into the characters themselves.
Again, I think it's a reflection of how good Marvel understands character and what makes these, comic book heroes so compelling to people. And the fact that they're able to just continually innovate and modernize it for, contemporary audiences and make it entertaining is just like, I just think it's a testament to how good they are as filmmakers and as storytellers. So
yeah, the fact that we can stay as engaged as we do, just as much with, two people sitting in a house talking as, bunch of helicopters flying around shooting at each other, is a real testament, again, to how much they've invested in these characters and how much the audience cares about these characters. That I find those sort of conversations just as, if not more, engaging than explosions and gun battles.
Exactly, yeah. So this show, I definitely would say it focuses a lot on character, and that will be the foundation of how we move throughout this review today. Is we're going to go through a lot of the main characters, expand on our thoughts on what we thought of that character and their story that revolved around that. So that's how we're going to structure this review. But first, I need to acknowledge this because I was super happy to see it when it was announced, and I think he did an excellent job. The composer of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Henry Jackman, who did the music, I think did a fantastic job. He came on board for Captain America, the Winter Soldier, and for Civil War, and bringing him back to do this show, I thought fitted in so well because, again, just massaging that tone and that feel from those movies, which obviously involve some of these characters and that type of style into the show, I thought was really, really good. And I thought he did a great job with the music in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of Henry Jackman's work, and he is a great composer. And I feel like you could very much, again, like you said, tell the sort of continuity from those the movies.
Like the Winter Soldier theme.
Yeah, the Winter Soldier theme and Civil War, carrying that tone and style into this show, which obviously involves the same character, same sort of world, part of the MCU, was awesome. And I really like the main theme from this show.
Yeah.
Over the end credits and stuff, I thought it was really good.
Exactly. Now, obviously, coming into this show, based off how Endgame ended, we knew that Steve Rogers had retired as Captain America, and we knew that he was passing on the mantle to Sam Wilson. That had a lot of us comic book fans very excited because we knew the possibilities that they had based off the mythology that had been previously established. However, coming into this show, one of the things that made so much sense as it was all unfolding, but I don't think any of us really thought about it when it happened in Endgame, was that obviously Sam Wilson is taking over the mantle of Captain America, and that comes with it so many different things, so many mental challenges, obviously the stigma around a black man being in that position. It was fantastic storytelling, but obviously the series opens with a cameo from Rhodey, War Machine, which I thought was really, really cool. Glad to see him back in that little cameo. But Sam obviously starts the series having retired the shield and retiring the mantle as a way to, protect the legacy of Steve Rogers, Captain America. And that was a decision I didn't see coming, but I understood as the story was progressing why it was happening. But as a result of Sam, basically putting up the shield, the US government comes in, intervenes, and is like, let's make a new Captain America, basically having an American mascot on the front lines. And that's where we have the introduction of John Walker as Captain America. What were your thoughts on John Walker when we first got introduced to him and how he has slowly evolved across the series?
I thought it was quite an interesting arc. I was very happy with the... obviously, we got... At the end of the first episode, we had that sort of unveiling scene in front of the Senate building or whatever it was. But the first we really saw of him was as John Walker in his locker room before
he gets
that
revealed.
Big stadium interview thing. And I like that that he wasn't an outright villain from the start. You could see that his intentions were good. He was talking about, the pressure of being Captain America and how he just wants to do the right thing. I think it's really important to show that, he was, in essence, a worthy choice for Captain America at that beginning stage. They went through it, he had 3 Medal of Honors and all the rest of it. But you could tell early he wasn't outright a bad choice. His intentions were pure at the start, and I thought that was really important to show this guy's not the worst yet.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
The funny thing is, with regards to what you were just mentioning, is that I feel like John Walker was chosen because he was a great soldier. Steve Rogers was chosen because he was a great man. And I think that was the two distinguishing factors between Steve and John when they took up that mantle of just they had a certain perspective of how they saw the world. And Steve Rogers definitely had this perspective of, I don't like bullies. And that's really what drove him. Whereas John Walker was doing it from a perspective of, this is a responsibility that I've been bestowed and I need to live up to that legacy that Steve Rogers has left behind. And I thought that's, like you mentioned, the pressure I thought John Walker was a fantastic character. I loved how compelling and complex he was, because when he comes in, like you said, he's just coming in wanting to just fulfill this role and be really like he just wants to do the best he can. And as you see, as the series progresses, he slowly is losing control of situations. He's always like 3 or 4 steps behind the villains, and of course our 2 main characters, Sam and Bucky. So him always trying to play catch up and just feeling like he could never really get a foothold of the situation, I thought was really entertaining to see his kind of descent, not into madness, but like his descent from that like peak of Captain America to being disowned of that mantle.
Yeah, I think it's even in the first Captain America movie, in that conversation between Steve and Dr. Erskine before the operation. He goes, "Not a perfect soldier, but a good man." They're the 2 sides that we've got, and even throughout the series, like you said, the way that John Walker was falling behind in all these situations, he was coming at it from that soldier perspective. You could see, he was chasing after the Flag Smashers, who I'm sure we'll get into throughout the series, but coming at it not from the who are these guys, but as a soldier, which led to, normally if Cap was behind original Cap, he would have come at it from the same angle as them, and being behind in that sense doesn't have the same impact because you're just trying to understand the people. But as a soldier, it's much harder to handle, I think.
And Lamar even mentioned that a few times, like in the heat of battle, you always make the right decision. So he's always been like, it's just more and more pressure that's just being put on him to be like, you've always done such a great job. Why do you think this mantle you'll change for that? And I thought the conversation that he and Lamar had with regards to the super soldier serum, like, would you take it? And then when we had that, scene where he does steal one of the last vials and obviously does take it, you see from there that insecurity that he has deep within, because the serum, it amplifies, what's already within, right? Mm-hmm. And him having that insecurity really leads to him becoming that tad bit unhinged. And obviously that scene where he, kills that Flag Smasher terrorist person in front of everyone, the whole world is watching and they've all got their video phones out. And depending on what side of the argument you want to take, you could say he probably did a good thing because he took out a terrorist, but also he just did it like cold-bloodedly in search of revenge, and it wasn't even the person that killed Lamar.
Yeah.
And what's even more bitter, that's what's really tragic about this, is that one guy, we get a scene earlier with him saying that as he was growing up, he was a fan of Captain America and that he looked up to Steve Rogers. And to see him then murdered by that same shield that Steve, was using, that was really poetic, but in a really tragic way.
Yeah, I think I enjoy that conversation between Lamar and Walker about the serum and the different measures of what's good. He's saying, you always make the right decisions in the heat of battle. He's got 3 Medal of Honors, but even John then says the things that I did to earn those medals didn't always feel like the right thing. That's that soldier. The right thing in a pitched firefight in Afghanistan is not the same right thing as, a Captain America dealing with people in their everyday lives, even if they are, terrorists or whatever the label they want to give them. The different measures of morality between a soldier and a superhero means they don't quite match up the same way.
Exactly, yeah. And that's one of the things I thought was quite interesting was, after he did eventually lose the shield, he then tries to, maintain that mantle of Captain America even after it's taken away from him. And seeing him in the finale, obviously having his own makeshift cosplay shield, which I thought was quite funny. But seeing that moment with him when he's chasing Carly and he's trying to take down the Flag Smashers, and then he gets to that moment where he has to make that choice, where he has to choose between chasing after Carly and capturing her or to save the people that were in the truck that was about to fall. And that scene, to me at least, was so fulfilling because seeing his redemption, because he was such a good, like a morally good character, to then see him come to this moment where he was so consumed by revenge, but in the heat of battle, he made the right decision and he tried to save the people. And to me, I really loved that moment.
Yeah, I think it was you could see he'd even welded his Medal of Honor on the inside of the shield.
Yep.
And there's a moment where he's down, he's like looking at it as sort of a reminder of that. And I think that's a moment where he almost switched from being the soldier Captain America to just a good person.
Exactly.
Making, like as you said, the right decision in the heat of the moment. It was very satisfying to see that when that.
And it's a good testament to how good, of the constructing character arcs Marvel is, because this character obviously has a history in the comic books, and that history kind of gets, brought to the surface at the very end of the show. But seeing his transition from this confused, insecure, soldier who has been bestowed so much responsibility and has the weight of an entire country and arguably the world on his shoulders, to see him go from that, his slow descent, to then having that rise again, I thought was really, really exciting to watch throughout the show. And obviously this all comes to a conclusion when he gets obviously the mantle of Captain America taken away from him, but he gets his more famous comic book term, US agent, bestowed upon him. So was that something you were expecting coming in?
Yeah. I think we all knew that was going to happen by the end of the series. I do like his comment. It's the same, but black.
Yeah.
And I'm very interested to see where they go with that. Because, again, we know that he is a morally good character, but we've seen that he can do some of the more slightly shady things. He did, murder a man with the metal shield.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see where he goes from here and how they use him, because I've heard a lot of talk that we've mentioned, the show mentioned the Raft came up several times, and there's, we know there's various villains locked up in there. So there's been a lot of talk about the Thunderbolts, which is, I guess, almost a Suicide Squad style. For Marvel. And having him be the leader of that is something that I think has either happened in the comics or makes a lot of sense.
I haven't thought about that.
So I'm interested to see where they go in the future.
Well, my big thing is whether John Walker as US agent will be more like a Punisher type character where he's just ruthless and just takes out criminals, or whether he'll be more like a Captain America but works in the shadows, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's either of those works. I think potentially sort of a more of your Captain America but covert. We do stuff that's
Special ops,
perhaps not the sort of thing that we want to be broadcasted by having the giant shiny shield flashed in front of it. The sort of stuff that doesn't end up in the papers on the front page, but is still important and valuable. So there's definitely a couple of roles that he could fill moving forward, and like I said, I'm interested to see where they go.
I'll say I really love the complex nature of John Walker, and I really loved watching his progression over the series. And one of the things that I thought was I would say interesting about the show was that I feel like everything that happened here was quite predictable, but I say predictable, everything that we got I think was right. I think Marvel and the showrunners told the right story, and a lot of it may have been predictable and we may have seen a lot of it coming, but I feel at the end of the day, it's very important to tell the right story. And the example I use to go against this would be Game of Thrones, right? So Game of Thrones is a show that has so much prestige around it because it's able to shock you, and it makes great use of the plot twists, and it takes the narrative in so many different directions to always keep you guessing, right? And I feel Falcon and the Winter Soldier was the opposite of that, where it gave you basically all the basic plot points that made sense, but it was making, it was the right story for that as it was going along. And I think that was very clear with how these characters started the story, where they ended up, especially with Sam. And I think it was really interesting seeing how the show was kind of predictable in a lot of sense, but at the same time, it was really satisfying.
Yeah, I think, I believe we mentioned this last time, but predictable doesn't mean bad, particularly when it's, logical and sort of resonant development of these characters and these plots. It's like, yes, we all predicted that because that's the clear, obvious, correct choice for where this character is going next.
Well, Endgame's a good example of that, right?
Exactly.
Like, so many people predicted that Tony Stark and Steve Rogers would die in that film. And both of them kind of did, in a sense. And even though we all kind of predicted that, it was still the right decision for the story. And it was still so emotionally potent. And I think, again, that's just a testament to, delivering a great story in the right way. And even if we do kind of see it coming, I guess maybe that's a subjective thing. Some people may say, oh, it was predictable, therefore it was boring. That could be a perspective, and I would totally understand that. But for me personally, I would much prefer having the right story told and keep it entertaining as opposed to being shocked and surprised every step of the way.
Yes, sometimes I disagree with the idea of a plot twist for the twist's sake. When there's a clear, more emotional direction to take it, even if that's the one that we predict, and often it is the one we predict because it's what we want to see the character go through next. So having something that's predictable isn't always bad, and I've said this so many times. I get sick of twists that it's like it's a twist and that's
it's just
it.
to pull the rug from underneath you for no sort of reason.
It's a moment rather than a logical character progression.
Yeah, that sort of shock factor.
Yeah, you can plot twist and, oh, wow, awesome, and then it means nothing. Then in the next episode, no one cares because there's no logical progression from that point. It's just the shock, and that's the shock.
A lot of shows do that, especially with trying to kill off characters, and then like next season is like they try to either replace that character or they come back to life somehow.
That's
a lot of shows do that.
That's the problem with comic books. No one stays dead.
Well, that's true. That is true.
So far, the MCU is doing okay-ish. I feel like they're moving in the right direction with the generational heroes moving through. So fingers crossed. But
the next thing I want to talk about with you is obviously the Flag Smashers and obviously Carly, who were our villains of the show. This is where I would draw some criticism on the show because I felt like the concept behind them and their motivations I thought was really good and could have been really compelling. However, each episode I found myself consistently asking like why is this happening and what is your motivation to do this exactly? And I always was a little bit confused as to why Carly and the Flag Smashers were, like what they were trying to accomplish in the grand scheme of things. I understand that they were trying to bring the world back to how it was during the blip, with a lot more unified society with no borders and stuff like that. But there was just a lot of times throughout the series where I had to ask myself, like, what are we trying to accomplish here?
Yeah. They were perhaps one of the less thought out elements of the show.
Because my thing to add on to this is, I guess, like there was a lot of mentions of like how the world was before and about how the governments of the world and stuff and the GRC, right? How they were treating people in certain situations. And I think the way to maybe have fixed this and maybe to give us, the audience, more context, because I feel like there was a lot of telling the audience the information as opposed to showing us. And within screenwriting and storytelling, show, don't tell is a great storytelling device. And I feel like maybe a way of showing us more would have maybe been like through more like news reports or like, little segments here and there where we just cut to stuff that's happening.
Stuff.
Well, not necessarily flashbacks, but just cut to scenes where we're seeing stuff happening live, similar to how when they revealed Captain America, right, and the characters kind of watch that news broadcast. Maybe like stuff like that, just little clips of saying like, this is what the GRC is doing to people, and this is what the struggles that certain individuals are having because of the blip and that type of stuff. And I think that might have been better if we saw that, emotionally engaged with that, and then understood more so why the Flag Smashers were doing what they were doing. I just felt there was a couple of times where they were saying like, we need to change things to how they were, and we need to fix things and do this and do that. And it was just a lot of telling me. And then I just didn't understand it because I had no sort of evidence as to why things need to be the way they think it should be. And I'm not saying that they're wrong in their beliefs, but just as an audience member, I couldn't really engage with their motivation. Yeah,
it's hard to understand where they're coming from when we haven't seen it ourselves. Like, they're going...
There's 5 years of missing information, right? So
we're going back to the way things were, but the audience doesn't know what that looks like. I feel like they had to walk a line because it was very much making sure that we didn't start rooting for them is a dangerous thing that you can do in stuff like in films and books and whatnot, is when you make your villains too empathetic and understandable, and you start, you're going, actually, they're right. Maybe we should go for them instead.
Yeah, but see, it's funny you say, like, I think that makes for some of the best stories. That's why I think Civil War is such a great film, because you see both sides, and depending on what your political stance might be, you might pick Tony's side or you might pick Cap's side. So I think stories like that, where you can see both perspectives so clearly, staying within the MCU, Thanos would be another great example. You can totally understand his motivation and his backstory and why he is thinking the way he is in his murderous ways. But I would say that it's sometimes good to have that. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, it can be. And I think, and I possibly even agree that this could have been a similar sort of example. Even Sam has a conversation with Carly. That's, I agree with your fight, but not the way you're fighting it. I think that's almost the ideal place to be in with your villains is, they've got a point, but you're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah.
The ends don't justify the means.
I would agree.
Is a sort of catch-all statement for those sort of things. And I do agree that we didn't have enough context for exactly what they were doing. I think it all came more through at the end. They were trying to push the Global Repatriation Council, the GRC, to not reinstate these borders and whatnot that they were trying to do. But that wasn't clear earlier in the season, I agree.
Yeah. I think it was okay. It could have been better. And I think the way it could have been better if they just gave us a little bit more context and fleshing out of the actual world itself, like Earth as a character, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And how the civilization is being treated and stuff like that. I think that could have improved it, but that's okay. I'll say that's one of the things I disliked about the show. I think it could have been better, but one of the things I loved about this show, and I think you're on the same page, was seeing Zemo return in all his glory.
Yeah, I liked the sort of I think the character dynamic between the three of them, Sam, Bucky, and Zemo,
completely unexpected as well,
is great. I really like that angle of Zemo being almost not villainous. He was sort of heroic, but
he was an anti-hero.
He was heroic, but through these slightly less favorable means and whatnot.
He had his own motivation and goals, and he was doing that, through Sam and Bucky. But at the end of the day, he was still doing it through, pretty bad means.
Yeah.
So.
But there's actually, I do really like, the characterization of Zemo in his stance on, the whole reason he got involved in this in the first place.
Exactly.
And even the whole reason he showed up in Civil War, the continuity is good, is his straight, he's against super soldiers at all. And he sticks by that the entire way through. And I think that's really good characterization and really useful to make him sort of sympathetic and someone you can almost go for. As particularly, I know early on it was all, oh, they've got a villain, this could be bad. But the fact that they played up his code of honor, his simple stance of I don't want super soldiers, means that at no point you felt too scared that he was going to turn on them or betray them or anything. And I think that's really useful to have that sort of character, but you're not constantly looking for the backstabbing.
Well, it could have been a very similar situation to like Loki, right? Where he's one of those characters who you never know where he's going to go, right?
Exactly.
With his motivations. Whereas Zemo had a very clear goal and he was striving towards it. And I think he accomplished his goals definitely by the end of the series when his butler finished off the job, which I thought was hilarious. At first, when the butler first showed up, I'm like, who's that? Like,
it took me a second.
But once I realized, I was like, oh, it's so good. And it makes so much more sense as to why in the raft, when he hears the radio report, he's like,
that's when I was
done.
like, who is that? And then as it cut, I went, oh, yeah, that's his butler bloke. I just think some security in those sort of things is always... it's nice for the audience. Like, a lot of those times you're sort of on edge, waiting for the backstab. But because he's had such clear motivation and we're given no indication that any ulterior motives, we know what he wants, and he
just doesn't want to go back to jail.
He's going to stick to that. Means we weren't looking for that backstab, which means that we were able to focus on that dynamic, which I thought was really fun. And you could tell that Daniel Brühl was having a lot of fun with this.
Well,
being slightly less of a sinister character, and having that almost that cheeky side,
yes,
which I thought was amazing.
Well, something I did not expect at all was that scene with Zemo in the nightclub giving us the dance moves, and then the fan campaign behind that. I remember seeing hashtag release the Zemo cut. And I was like, it's obviously a parody on hashtag release the Snyder cut. And I was just like, this is so ridiculous. I can't believe this is happening. But then Marvel, in a stroke of marketing genius, released on the day the next episode would be coming out, a hour-long version of Zemo dancing on YouTube. And then on their other social medias, they released the full extended cut, which was all of the various shots that they obviously, when they were on set, that they filmed for coverage and stuff. They used all that, edited it together, and then sent that out for people, and it went super viral. And I thought that was absolutely hilarious. I can't believe they did it, but they did it in a stroke of genius, and I thought it was so funny and a funny way to kind of reward the fans, because that was something they could easily do. That's something an editor just hops up into the room, quickly edits that together, and then whips that out. But as a result, it just built so much more fan engagement, which I really loved. Yeah,
you can tell when these sort of studios understand the fans and also are willing to have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's almost hey, look at how silly this is. And I think it was just the image of Zemo, who is such a sort of serious,
sinister character.
Yeah, but just
having a good time.
Yeah, and it's like it doesn't quite match, and it's hilarious. But yeah, having that almost more fun side to Zemo, you could tell he was, the sort of banter that he was having with Sam and Bucky was so entertaining.
Daniel Brühl, once again, did an excellent job of portraying the character. And the moment where we did get to see for that brief moment of the purple ski mask,
I do
that
like
ridiculous
that.
look, it looks so dope in live action. And I thought that scene surrounding it was really dope. And I'm glad we did get to see it. But I thought Zemo was a great character. It was a great inclusion in the series. I didn't expect him to be teaming up with Falcon and Winter Soldier. And all the stuff that they did with that dynamic, I thought was really entertaining. But I thought he was a great inclusion. The very brief inclusion of the Dora Milaje and the Wakandans I thought was very clever, which we'll touch on later because that factors into, obviously, the Falcon later on. But our next thing I want to quickly touch on is Sharon Carter. Yeah. And I'm very intrigued to hear your opinion on this because I don't know what it is. But my opinion on Sharon Carter is I I don't know if it's bad. I don't know if it's bad based off what the show is giving us. I don't think they did a bad job of doing it. However, me personally, I am not enjoying the direction that they're taking Sharon Carter as a character.
It is a bit of an odd sort of heel turn. There's sort of a mismatch with earlier Sharon, straight-laced SHIELD agent, CIA agent, to now
Crime gang, organization, terrorist.
And spoiler alerts, the power broker.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you ignore all that, I do think she could be very interesting and useful going forward. Having it's almost just sort of an ominous note, having someone that Sam and Bucky and, as far as we know, the US government and everyone that we know in the Avengers and whatever probably trusts completely at this point, being not trustworthy could lead to a lot of trouble later on.
I agree.
I think that could be very interesting and quite dangerous for some characters moving forward.
I agree. It's just one of those things I feel like because she is the niece to Peggy Carter, and because she has such obviously because Peggy has such an ingrained purpose within the MCU narrative, I'm not a huge fan of kind of tarnishing that family legacy in any way. And to jump on from what you said a little bit earlier about, obviously seeing that really sharp turn in motivation, this is where I feel like, again, this show could have dived more into this but decided not to, where obviously because Sharon wasn't blipped, she has been alive since Infinity War and has progressed through that 8 years, and she's been on the run, basically discarded by her country and her government. And as a result, I think she's basically been like, all right, well, fuck you guys. I'm going to go do my own thing and try and make my way in the world. And as a result, that's made her bitter and almost like become evil in a way. And I see, this is one of those things where I understand the motivation because I'm filling in all these gaps in my head, but the show hasn't given us that context of why she is the way she is based off that 8 years that she has been on her own.
Yeah, I think there's a really compelling story in there of the backstory of Sharon Carter and how she's been going since she's been on the run since Civil War. And, so she's been on the run for several years. Then the blip happens and she's got an extra 5 years to build up her criminal empire, potentially with much less competition than she would have normally. Mm-hmm. I think watching her as a character, there is definitely an interesting story watching her, that bitterness of being on the run, sort of turn her towards this that we haven't got yet, or we may never get. I feel like in a way it's almost that they had a loose end with Sharon from Civil War and probably didn't really have anywhere to go with her. And they've almost turned it into a reasonably useful... They've taken that loose end and then turned it into something that could have some big ramifications moving forward, having their power broker be a trusted military contact. So in that way, I sort of admire that they've managed to take this character that everyone sort of was like, she was a 5-minute love interest for Steve Rogers and she helped him out in Civil War, and they probably didn't have much of a story of that beyond that. There wasn't really anything to do with her after that, and they've almost created something that could be massive moving forward. So I have to admire them for that, and I think it could be very useful. But I do agree that there's some missing context in there to connect those two elements of Sharon Carter.
And I agree. I don't think it's bad. I just think we're just missing key puzzle pieces in order for it to be like, oh, that makes so much more sense. It's one of those things I feel like it's definitely moving the chess pieces, getting ready for the future. And I think it's definitely clear that she's going to pop up in the MCU again in some pivotal role. My question to you is now, because I think there's two potentials, because obviously since the finale aired, it's been officially confirmed that Captain America 4 is in development with obviously Sam Wilson and as Captain America. And my question to you is now, do you think it's more likely that we see Sharon Carter reappear in the MCU in Captain America 4, or what I personally think, she might show up in Armor Wars, the War Machine show, because we know the premise for that show is that a bunch of technology and Stark tech gets stolen and acquired by some criminals, and War Machine has to deal with that, and obviously there's a bunch of drama that will be surrounding that. So my question to you now is, where do you think she's going to show up next?
I think that's probably more likely and certainly more interesting. Having her slightly disconnected from the Captain America stuff, I think will be really good to see her as her own character, because obviously everything we've seen of her is connected to the Captain America mantle. So having that step away is very useful. I hadn't actually considered Armor Wars, because I know there's been some debate. Obviously, there's these rumored official-ish talk of Captain America 4, but also people talking about, will there be a season 2 of this show? So there's a disconnect there. But yeah, I think Armor Wars is a very useful place for her.
I would agree. And to just quickly jump on from what you said about the continuation of the story, a lot of people were asking that question of, will there be a season 2 for this show? And the reason I say I don't think so is because at the very end of the show, it ends with transitioning from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. So I think that was the show's way of being like, this is the end of this story, and we're going to continue on to something else. And I think a Captain America 4 with Sam Wilson at the mantle would be the best next step.
I think that very much fulfills, sort of exemplifies the role that these stories can fill. Having this extended thing to show the massive character development that Sam goes through, and several other characters, and the sort of extending out that transition, really diving into the meaning of the shield and the sort of complicated American history behind it, works in the extended 6-hour runtime, which then allows them to have a stronger basis for Sam Cap to be Captain America moving forward, going back to those MCU movies.
Exactly, yeah. Because they've got rid of all that sort of important drama that they've dealt with in the show, now they can focus on something brand new and not have to worry about all that sort of in-between stuff. So I think, that was really clever on their part. But one of the things that I thought was really emotionally engaging throughout this show was obviously seeing Bucky Barnes again. He has gone through quite the journey in the MCU, being best friends with Steve, being in the military, and then having that accident where he was then acquired by a Hydra and turned into the Winter Soldier and did so many terrible things, as Bucky, but not really. And seeing him then obviously get a clean slate. That scene where, we see him in Wakanda and AO is basically trying to, brainwash him again, but then he isn't.
Unbrainwash him.
Yeah. But we see him here set free. Yeah. And I thought that was a great scene, really emotionally powerful. Sebastian Stan, yet again, so amazing in this show. And I was really excited to see his way that he sort of worked with Sam across this show, and his back and forth and their sort of friendship growing throughout the show, because they start off quite bitter and resentful of each other at the start, and they're not really friends, even though they've kind of been associated with each other across the movies. But as we see throughout this show, they really start forming a bond, and seeing Bucky kind of get a friendship and have a place in society again, I thought was really rewarding.
Yeah, I do enjoy the fact that they almost refuse to acknowledge that they have a friendship. I think it's the second to last episode when they're doing the shield training. They go, no, we're colleagues. Yeah, we're friend of a friend. It's like, no, this whole episode has been a demonstration that you are friends, and I enjoy the fact that they just refuse to acknowledge that at that point.
Well, the finale is a great example of that, where Bucky is basically invited to their cookout and they're just having fun and drinking beers and having a good time together and celebrating. And I just was, it's definitely clear that Bucky has now found a place in society. And that moment where he, basically comes clean to that older Asian gentleman who has lost his son, that was one of those things that was set up in the early episodes and came back at the end and was so emotionally powerful.
Yeah.
And again, it was one of those things where I would say it was predictable. I could see it coming, but again, it was so right for his character arc and basically being able to knock off all those people on his list and say, clearly that, I have made amends for everything I did as the Winter Soldier and I can continue into the future as myself.
Yeah, I think he's gone through a lot as well. But I know a lot of people who have talked about the fact that, maybe he should have got the shield, but just this show just demonstrated as awesome as he can be, he's got too much in his past that he's got to come to terms with before he can represent something as big as being Captain America. And I do think having him, the continuity between the two is very useful. At the end, he says, Cap to Sam. As
I love that moment.
It's a good moment. No, I liked his redemption arc, and I also liked the way that Sam has that moment where he's no, you're trying to do it the wrong way. At the start, he's going through that book and trying to right all his wrongs. It's like, no, you're not making amends, you're avenging. You're trying to undo or make right for all the wrong things that you have either done or have enabled in the past, but that's not going to help you.
You need to bring closure to these people.
You need to bring closure and just move on. So it's not about making it right, it's about making peace with the wrong. And the comparison between, in the early episodes, he's trying to be a friend to this old man, trying to make him feel better, give him a friend, whilst also going out, you see him, basically arresting an old Hydra person, whereas compare that to the end where he's abandoned all the Hydra stuff and he's just going and saying, I did this thing, I'm sorry, and moving on. The comparison between those two different ways of tackling that problem really exemplified what it means to move on from that sort of thing, which no one has actually had in real life, I hope. But again, showing that importance of Sam in that relationship, and everyone loves that. That dynamic is always fun.
I agree.
I think I've said to you before that the fact that the idea for this show and the audience engagement and the audience desire for this show comes from those scenes in Civil War where it's just, can you move your seat up? No.
Yeah, it's so good.
So even those I like the marriage counseling scene.
That was great fun.
It was good fun, but also a really good indicator of exactly where this animosity between the two comes from. I know Bucky, well, mostly from Bucky going, you gave up that shield. Cap gave you that shield. Giving it up was wrong, and it means that maybe you're not as good a person as Steve thought you was, which means maybe I'm not as good a person as Steve thought I was. And just the complexity in what that shield means to both of them, not just as a symbol, but as a mantle of someone they both knew personally, has a very different meaning to them who are much closer to it to the general world. And even that closer relationship can be quite complex.
I have nothing more to add on that. I think you really well articulated that sort of story element. And I agree. It was really, really well done.
Yeah.
So the next thing that I want to talk about, and what I would say was probably the emotional center of this story, was the inclusion of Isaiah Bradley in this show. Obviously, dealing with a black man taking on the role of Captain America has so much cultural and societal weight behind it. And the inclusion of Isaiah Bradley, a super soldier who was around during, the 20th century, and basically got the short end of the stick for a lot of good deeds that he did. And his journey was really unbelievable, because a lot of the things he did, the story he told where he basically broke out and tried to save his comrades because he knew that they needed saving. And the story that he told was basically parallel to what Steve did during World War II, where he, disobeyed orders, broke into the Hydra facility, saved all his, fellow soldiers, brought them back to base, and he was celebrated and rewarded for that because of those efforts. And we see Isaiah did a very similar thing and was punished for it because he disobeyed orders. And I think that's a sad commentary on, obviously, American history and the race relations over there. But in saying that, I think even though it's terrible what happened to him, I think the story and the drama that they used for this show based around these themes, I thought was really, really compelling.
Yeah, certainly very topical at the moment, and particularly not even the comparison between him and Steve's, but the fact that no one knows who he is. The whole, just completely swept under the rug, erase this sort of part of history.
Because they don't want a super soldier black hero to be around during that time.
Black man can't be Captain America. But also, I think one of the most compelling elements is having him be the opposite sort of perspective to Sam, despite being in similar positions. Sort of having that sort of being the other side of the coin of what Sam could be.
The thought process.
Yeah. It's that bitterness that Sam's trying to avoid. And I think Sam's conversation with his sister about Isaiah Bradley was sort of the encapsulation of that theme is, yeah, I'd probably feel the same way, but I still have to try.
Yeah, that was one of those things. Obviously, race relations over in America is very it's on thin ice at the moment, which is very unfortunate. And when you're dealing with anything sort of political in this sort of realm, lots of people will have different opinions and will see things a different way. But my personal opinion is, I think the show did a really good job of handling this, of this sort of these themes and this story. And seeing that journey of Sam, seeing what Isaiah went through and said, I'm not going to let this, dictate what I do in my future. And he said that, basically he was going to learn from that and take it on the chest, and then use that as motivation to take it, the mantle forward and be a force for good and lead by example and kind of right the wrongs where, the past had left behind, sort of thing. So I think that was a good emotional center to have Isaiah's character in there. Obviously, he has some comic book history as well, and for those comic book fans, I'm sure that would have been really rewarding to see that story element brought to screen. But as someone who didn't know about that specific element, I was very engaged by it all the way through, and the final scenes with him in the finale just absolutely destroyed me, because it was just so rewarding to see that man celebrated and to see that man have his history shown off to the world when it really deserved to be. And I absolutely loved this moment. It was a great climax to that story, a great resolution, and I was just bawling my eyes out for those last couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think the awesome comparison between Isaiah's stance of they won't want a black man to be Captain America, so don't try and please them, don't sort of put yourself in there, versus Sam's position of, I have this opportunity, I'm going to try and use it as a force for change. Not don't be bitter about the past, but try and change it for the future, is the sort of two sides of that argument. And again, we see the demonstration of that of he's using that mantle of Captain America to bring this other story into the light. Like you said, very emotional scene at the end there, and showing that even, Isaiah, that's all he really wanted was for his story to be not hidden and not, he's not a mark on history. He's a genuine part of it. And, that's all he wanted, and that's what Sam was able to give him. And I think, I doubt he'll show up again, but I think it would be interesting to see how much of that bitterness is still around now that the narrative has changed.
Resolved.
Yeah.
I think it's also a testament to how morally great, Sam is as a character, that he could see, the wrongs of the past, and he wants to do his best to right them.
Yeah.
And I think this now transitions us into the final character, the most important, and brings us towards the end of this review, where Sam Wilson, Captain America, finally. This was what we were all looking forward to. Let's try and change the mood here. Let's get back excited. We've dealt with some heavy stuff now. But I think we can all agree, all MCU fans coming into this show wanted to see Sam Wilson embrace the mantle, become Captain America, and boy did he at the end with a very comic book accurate suit. And yes, it looks ridiculous, but somehow the MCU yet again has made it look so fucking badass.
I've always said that was one of my main motivations back at Endgame, when it was the comparison of who should get it, Sam or Bucky. One of my main motivations for picking Sam was his suit looks so cool. Yes. I love that suit. No, I think it was great. We had all this time with this show with Sam not having the mantle of Captain America, but really they weren't subtle about it completely, just almost ramming it down our throats, but showing us at every opportunity just how much he's like Steve and how much he deserves to be Captain America. Almost every episode there was a moment where you go, yep, that's a Captain America thing.
Exactly.
He's the right man for Captain America.
That scene where he confronts the senators and stuff, and basically the news is broadcasting that sort of conversation to the world. That moment was unbelievably powerful because all the dialogue was so emotionally right, not only for him as a character, but for the MCU world, but also the real world as well. And that moment where Sam says, "We can do better." I think it's such a powerful message, and this is one of the things that I will hope that society moves forward with, is that, again, a lot of people like to be cynical about the current world that we live in and say that, things aren't going to change or they're moving too slowly. I really do think that when our generation and the people younger than us really, get older and into these positions of power that, a lot of the people currently hold, I really do think that's when we're going to see some really meaningful change. And having shows like this, as silly or trivial it might seem, that a comic book show holds this kind of weight in society, I really do think that having heroes like Sam Wilson, a black Captain America, really can be a source of inspiration and a great role model for a lot of people, not only our own age, but for younger people, but also people that are older as well. And that moment I thought was really, really profound, with Sam basically saying, "I'm Captain America, this is what we need to do, and we need to do it better."
Yeah, that was very much almost the capstone of, yeah, he's Captain America, because if that speech wasn't a Captain America speech, I don't know what is. So, he's inherited the whole shebang, the shield, the suit, and the speech ability.
Yes. It reminded me similar of the moment in Winter Soldier where Steve is going over the intercom and basically saying to people like, freedom, the cost of freedom is high.
Yeah.
And it was reminiscent of that. And again, it just proves that Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson, as Captain America, is the perfect choice.
Yeah, it's the right way to move forward. I think, yeah, and Sam was present for that moment ago. Did you come up with that off the top of your head? Which I think Sam also did at the end of this series. But I think perhaps more important is the more smaller moments throughout the entire series that's showing Sam to be the right person.
His evolution.
Yeah. So his conversation with Carly, where she goes, "Are you just hopelessly optimistic or a genius?" And he's like, "Can I be a bit of both?" Showing that he does have those similar qualities to Steve Rogers of that optimism and that idea of looking even at the villains. He's always looking at who are they, what do they want, who are they, why are they doing this, how can I help them?
Because that's really who he is. Because when you consider his past, he was obviously worked in the military, in the Air Force and stuff, and then after his time in service, he was helping veterans and building those relationships and helping people recover from PTSD and stuff like that. So he's always had he's always been a very morally strong character, and to see that evolution from when we were first introduced to him in Winter Soldier to this show was just really satisfying.
Yeah, and I think, again, the parallels between him and Steve, which they nailed, were that optimism, and in that conversation, even before that conversation, his first thing is, I don't think she's, why is she doing this? Not how can we stop her? Why is she doing this? What does she want? Similar to, I can remember a moment in Age of Ultron, the first time Cap is talking to, I believe, Kobe Smolder's character, Agent Maria Hill, about the twins going, who are they, what's their story, as opposed to how can we stop them. And it's that same mentality that's one of the most important parts of Captain America, is he's a hero for everyone. He wants to know the villain's story rather than just how to stop them, which, on the flip side, John Walker, not interested in her story. Just how do we arrest her? Just the whole show is just a demonstration on why Sam is the right choice.
Not just a good soldier, a good man.
Good man.
And I think that's a great way to end this conversation. I think the show overall was damn entertaining all the way through, even though we saw a lot of it coming and that a lot of it was predictable. I think that the story started and ended in the right places, and the journey had many highs and lows whilst we were going throughout it. And I would say this was another smashing success for Marvel, and I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think they've, again, not nailed everything 100%, but nailed the most important elements, which is those central characters that we're going to carry through for the next 5 years or however long they're hanging around. And now we've seen again, they know their leads, they know their heroes, and we care about them, and they're doing them right. And that's the most important element of these shows. Definitely what their main aim was, and they've absolutely hit it on the head. I loved them.
I'm really glad to see, not only Sam really come into his own, but I'm really glad that Bucky is now in a state where he is, emotionally fulfilled and is actually happy in life, because he has gone through so much emotional turmoil. So I'm glad to see that our two protagonists are now in great mental states, and now they've got so much more interesting narrative real estate that they can do, whether it's in a show or a movie, most likely a movie. But I'm really excited to see where they go next. And any final thoughts on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, or should I say Captain America and the Winter Soldier?
Which is slightly confusing because that's already a thing. Again, just super happy that we were able to spend the full 6 hours really fleshing out mostly Sam and Bucky, but also John Walker, even Carly to a lesser extent, having, I think there's a lot of interesting questions with the blip that can be explored moving forward. But I think, the main focus of this is our new Captain America. He's just as good as the old one, the same moral fiber, and, you know, can you stay down? No. This is our new Captain America, who's just got all the right characteristics as the old one, but he's a different color now, and I think he's going to be very important moving forward. And I'm very happy to see that Captain America is still around, but slightly different.
It's definitely an interesting future on the horizon. And I was going to say, I think the show itself was good, but as an MCU fan and as someone who loves these characters and this universe that's been established, absolutely loved it. Had a fantastic time all the way through. So, yep, those are my and Sam's thoughts on the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this conversation. I know that this show was very well received for the most part by many fans, and I hope that you guys have lined up on the same page with us as well. So thank you very much for watching this video and review of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. There will be more content coming to the channel soon, so make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in another video.